Come on out to Mississauga, it's the greatest place around. Where on a quiet evening you can watch the sun go down. And if you should need a friend, there are plenty to be found. That's why everybody loves that good old Mississauga.
Hello, and thank you for joining us here on Ask a Historian. I'm Matthew Wilkinson, historian with Heritage Mississauga. Please send in your questions to history@heritagemississauga.org as we explore the fascinating stories of Mississauga together here on the program. Like, subscribe, and follow us and stay up to date on all the heritage happenings with Heritage Mississauga. As part of this program, we will be exploring memories and moments and milestones from the past 50 years with past and present civic leaders and citizens as part of the City of Mississauga's 50th anniversary. On this week's episode, we are delighted to be joined by City of Mississauga Mayor Carolyn Parrish as we will explore her personal perspectives of moments and milestones for the City of Mississauga's 50th anniversary. Well, Mayor Parrish, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here with moments and milestones, memories and milestones for the City of Mississauga's 50th anniversary. I can imagine you've got just a slew of things on the slate. So again, thank you for spending some time with us here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, let's jump right into just exploring your own connections to the City of Mississauga. I know you're the newly elected mayor, but you have a long history with the City of Mississauga. Can you talk about some of your earliest memories of when Mississauga became home to you?
Well, we moved here in 1974, which makes us 50-year anniversary as well as the city's 50-year anniversary.
Wonderful.
I'm on the south side of the Queensway, and on the north side, there was a horse farm. There was a great big farm. It had a couple sheds. I don't think there was a farmhouse, but there were horses wandering about. Then houses came in on the north side of the Queensway just before ours was completed. I can remember my dad and my husband actually subcontracted the house. Just to put things in perspective, we bought the lot, which is about a third of an acre. It's a beautiful pie-shaped lot for $20,000. And we built the house for $40,000. And so the first couple of years we lived here, we really couldn't afford to even talk to the neighbors because they were much wealthier than we were. But anyway, we struggled and we made it. I had 2 children here. And it was a lovely place to bring children up. They went to the local public school. They went to Hawthorne. And I got very involved because I was a high school teacher before I had kids. Having a traditional Polish mother, when you have children, you stay home with them. So, and we didn't have any such thing as maternity leave with teachers in those days. So we ate a lot of craft dinner. And I had the delightful discovery that when you read the ingredients in it, it wasn't poison. My mother would never give us that. She would make her own macaroni and cheese. And I read the ingredients and I thought, these look fine to me. So we existed on them for a bit. But anyway, it's interesting to sit and look in my backyard because when we first moved here, it was a great big patch of grass. And we slowly did different things to it. And I look at our backyard and I sit there sometimes in the evening with a big grin on my face because to me, it looks like a park. We planted all the right trees. We moved things around. It's really grown up. So it's been wonderful to watch the yard. And it's been a really good experience living here. We've gone through about 3 generations of people moving in and out on the street. I think we have only one original owner left on our half of the street, which is Wanda Murray, our next door neighbor. She's a widow now, and we sort of take care of her. She swears she can't afford to buy the Toronto Star, but she just wants to read the obituaries. So we take our papers over to her every morning when we're finished with them. But no, it's been a really wonderful city. I've had a lot of really good experiences here. I have the good fortune of being on parent-teacher groups, ratepayer groups. Under David Cullum, we protested all kinds of things and marched the streets once in a while. Cullum was an activist. He was our counselor when we first lived here. And went on into politics myself, quite unintentionally, but that's where I ended up.
And what, I remember us talking, so you have a connection to Froebel in Arundel as well, right? Is that one of your children went to Froebel?
Both of my kids went to Freuble, where
Okay.
you went,
I
and you
did.
did look a lot different in those days. You had the same little round face, and you were absolutely an adorable child. But Susie started at one of the local schools. She was in junior kindergarten. And I picked her up about the end of the first week of school, and she said, Mommy, one of the kids got spanked in the storytelling chair. I said, Are you kidding me? March, march, march. Took her by the hand, went in the school. I said, Is it possible that a teacher would spank a child? And they said, Sometimes discipline is necessary. This was the bad old days. So I took her out of school and kept her home for all her kindergarten year because they didn't have junior kindergarten in those days. It was
Yep.
kindergarten year. And then our neighbor behind us, the McKechnies, had David McKechnie. I don't know if you remember him. He was at Freuble. So we went over and we applied to get into Freuble because it was very inexpensive as long as you did some teaching and participated.
Yep.
So that's what we did. I taught art lessons to the kids. And Susie was there till grade 3. And then Lindsay, the funniest story, she was there for junior K and kindergarten, then wanted to go to the big school with Susie. But years later, she said to me, Mommy, it's really embarrassing that I failed kindergarten. I said, What do you mean you failed kindergarten? Well, I was in kindergarten for 2 years with the same teacher. I said, No, you were in junior kindergarten, then you were in kindergarten. But I remember Freuble as I described it to people like the HMS Pinafore. Whenever you went in there, if the kids were noisy or anything was going on, Barbara Corbett would start singing. And then all the kids would stop what they're doing and sing with her. So the discipline there was very gentle, and there were no spankings in the storytelling chair.
So I'm trying to picture this. Did you teach me art? I don't remember
I
that.
may have taught you art. I taught different groups. We did chalk pastels. We did some watercolors. I wasn't very good at watercolors, but the kids didn't know the difference. And I used to bring my cocker spaniel in when I was teaching art, and she'd wander around. The kids would pet her, but it was just like a big family there. I just loved it.
I remember the Corbett's, Dr. Bowlby and Dr. Corbett. They had was it the terriers, the two terriers around? I
Yes,
remember
two
those.
Scotch terriers.
Yep, yep. That was I remember those, and I remember being in the basement of the church, and anytime the teacher, she just put her hand up like that, and everybody would be silent.
I don't know. It was a fabulous school. People came from Oakville. They came from all over for that place.
Yeah, no,
And
I
it,
enjoyed it
it
too.
was a wonderful experience for my kids.
So I had no idea that you arrived in 74. This is 50 years of Mississauga, 50 years of you in Mississauga. And back in 74, we're living in, an emerging city, a brand new city, and things looked a little different than they do today, dare say. What are some of the things that jumped out to you? Just, there's early memories of living in the city, just, getting about the city. You would have seen the Brano, Square One was less than a year old. I'm just trying to think of those things that jump out of your mind about way back when in 74.
Well, there were fields around Square One, and I can remember on Victoria Day of all times, rather than Canada Day, we would drive over there, and there was lots of parking, and sit on blankets and watch the fireworks that Square One would set off. I always loved fireworks. We did that. Traffic wasn't terrible. Square One was much smaller than it is now. It was a little square configuration, I think, and then now it's a big figure eight, and goodness knows what it is because I hardly ever go there. I need a road map to find my car, but it was everything was on a smaller scale, but building quickly. Like you could just watch subdivisions go up. One day the field would be there, and the next day there'd be pipes in, and it felt like a week later there were houses going up. So it was a rapidly building time. And as I say, the traffic was not too bad. I can remember as a child, there was a chunk of land right in the heart of Mississauga, I would guess city center, was owned by the Regina family.
Okay.
And my dad was the policeman in Etobicoke in Toronto. And we used to come out to Pete Regina's farm to ride horses. And that was right where Square One and City Hall are. So that goes even further back than the 50 years I've lived here, obviously.
Yep.
But as a child, I can still remember Regina family was a massive family, and every weekend there were lots of people around the table. and we were eating something that tasted really amazing in Italian. It turned out it was rabbits, and I thought I was going to die. And they said, well, it tastes just like chicken. I said, then why don't you eat chicken? Why are you eating little fuzzy bunnies? So my mother clamped her hand over my mouth. And I was always one that, as the thought was running in my head, it was coming out of my mouth.
So now, looking back over again that time in the city, let's talk about the evolution you've seen. I mean, you're a resident here for 50 years, and obviously your memories go back further than that of this place. But over that length of time, again, the city's evolved greatly. Are there some, say, let's look at some high points. I mean, you were here obviously during the derailment, but let's think of some of the positive changes that you've seen, or in your mind that you've seen in the city that kind of have helped shape the city the way it is today.
Well, I think Hazel was definitely a positive change.
Yeah.
Hurricane Hazel blew into town. Well, she was always in Streetsville and really didn't want Streetsville to join Mississauga, but I think she was a very dramatic addition. And I think the derailment probably put her on the front pages of most newspapers.
Yeah.
But when you listened to her, what you heard was common sense. You didn't hear pie in the sky. You didn't hear all this other stuff. You just heard a woman who was very much in touch with the people that she was the mayor for, and very sensible, and always enjoyed listening to her. The night of the derailment, I'll show you my sense of direction is really terrible. I was upstairs in a bathtub, and I shouldn't even say this on public, but this massive explosion took place, and I could see it in the sky out of the bathroom window. And I yelled down to David, I think they've blown up New York. David said, are you out of your mind? New York is not in that direction. I thought, okay. But that caused quite a stir. The derailment, I can remember we were allowed to stay home for a while. And then they started patrolling the streets and making sure people were staying inside their house. We're fairly close. It was on Mavis, right at the tracks. And we're just south of Queensway. So you could see the hustle and bustle, and they started evacuating in close. So what do I think of to take when I evacuate? Of course, my children and the husband, and of course the dog. And then I take the canary, because I thought, canary, we'll take the canary with us. And in those days, you were allowed to have fur coats. You don't have them now. I grabbed my fur coat because my father had given it to me for my 18th birthday. And that's my worldly possessions went to my mother-in-law's. Now, my mother-in-law and father-in-law were nice people, but living with them for, I don't know how long we were there, 10 days, 5 days, 7 days. It just felt like an eternity. I couldn't wait to get home. It was significant. Hazel was significant. David Cullum, in his own way, was significant as our local councillor, because we had a ditch at the end of our property, and the kids go flying across the yard and they'd fall in the ditch. It was full of water. So I hauled myself in and called him, and he came out and looked at it, and about 4 days later there was a city installed chain link fence across there. So the man was very responsive to his constituents. What else happened? The building of the city hall was a big deal. Also the building of the school board building, the Peel Board of Education building. I was on the Peel board elected in 1985. And I was there when it was in the old building on John Street. And I can remember Lagerquist and a few others sitting there smoking cigarettes while we were having board meetings. And I remember thinking what a bad example that was. Eventually, it did get banned. But they were puffing away. I think Ruth Thompson was a smoker. I think a few of them. So we moved into a new school building, and we had that city hall built. And those were big, dramatic steps. And of course, Square One expansion. All these things indicated a growth of population, more people interested in living in Mississauga. We went from 250,000 people to we're at 770,000 now.
Yeah.
And the traffic shows that we've got more people on the road. but it's still nothing compared to Toronto. If you go down to Toronto, it's like taking your life in your hands, and you have to plan 4 hours to get to one place. So people complain about our traffic, but it's not that bad. It's pretty well organized.
Well, having just spent some time in New York City, I can say we're not that bad.
Yeah, I think comparatively, I think people who've lived here a long time, like I have, you can see the changes. You can see there's more traffic, and you can see there's The lights are timed now. Everything seems to be working rather smoothly, but I guess they still complain. We always like the good old days. We always look back and say, gee, it was so much nicer then. I'm not sure it was. I think we have a lot of amenities. As the mayor, I would very much like to see the Living Arts Center expanded up to 2,000 seats so that we can compete for some of the bigger acts that could go to Toronto. I got some old documents on it where I'm getting off on an aside, but it's a little pet peeve of mine.
By all means.
And right in the documents, it said, we will not compete with Toronto. So we will keep our theater under 1,200 seats, which they did. And it took us right out of the market for anything that's really going to attract people into the LAC. So I want to see that expanded. I also am concerned that in city center, we have no really nice restaurants that you could take a guest from out of town. We've got Alioli's, and when it's closed, everybody just sits there and goes, now what will we do? So I would like to build a conference center on the southeast corner of the LAC property. And I like to start with a couple of good restaurants in there and a hotel tower. And I'm told that when our hotel rooms are at 65%, we need to build another hotel. We've been at 93% all summer.
Wow.
So I would like to very much get that project underway. The other thing is City Hall is pretty deserted now. I can remember when I worked there before, when I was first elected, it was hustle bustle. Everything was exciting. There were people, rooms were all full. You had to book a conference room. And now you could shoot a cannon through the place. So the new CAO has decided people are coming back to work 3 days a week in January. And I think that's a good move.
Yep.
We're also doing major renovations to the ground floor to make it a more interesting place for the public to come in and be served rather than having to wait in line. And goodness knows, I don't even know how they've been served the last couple of years, but it's going to be a face-to-face with people at desks downstairs, reception desks. So I'm very excited about that.
Turning City Hall back into a hub for people. It's
correct.
Very good, very good.
And I like to go one step further and get rid of paid parking. I think the employees coming back, it's a nice bonus. They don't have to pay for parking.
Yeah.
And the people who paid the taxes that built the building shouldn't have to pay to go into it. So we're working on that right now. We have a report coming on how much we actually make from paid parking. I think the paid parking providers make a lot of money, but I'm not sure we do.
Well, all looking forward, and I love the thought of not sitting on the past, and you make evolutions to the city as it grows and continues to grow. And I wish you luck. I'm fascinated by the hotel possibility and restaurants. But so let's jump back into kind of your not memories, I guess, in a sense, but also the things that you've been connected to. Are there organizations or groups that you've been involved with? And I know that's probably countless, but I just things that's kind of sticking in your mind that really had that connection to the growth of the city, the contribution to the growth of the city, just organization, clubs, that sort of thing.
I was on the ratepayers group for a long time in the area that I live in, under David Cullum. And we did things like the Hall on Stave Bank. We did petitions to try and change the traffic patterns. And it was activism, but it was kind of very local. And I did that. I also was actually president of the Parent Teacher Association at Hawthorne, where, by the way, my grandkids went through. So we're really solid in this community. I was always active. I was always very concerned about the quality of life in the city and the I can remember when I was first elected, I'd been as an MP to several Canada Days where A, you boiled, and B, you stood on the stage and you were introduced, and that was it. And I remember getting elected and sitting around a council table one day and saying to Hazel, why can't we have fireworks and a really big event on Canada Day? And she said, I am not blowing taxpayers' dollars up in smoke. I said, well, Madam Mayor, almost like a child asking its mother, if I raise the money for the fireworks, can we please have a big special Canada Day next year? You raise the money and we'll talk about it. I said, okay. So I raised $100,000. We had a full-blown Canada Day. I can remember they had to close the section of Burnham Thorpe in front of City Hall because the people just came in droves. And it was an extremely successful day. So a couple days later, she bumped into me in the hall and she said, well, that was pretty good. Do it again. And so we started the tradition of a really big celebration on Canada Day with fireworks. I can still remember the day sitting on the blanket watching the Square One fireworks. And I thought, we've got to do that. So that was one of the things I was able to change when I became a councillor. I don't want to even try to take credit for a lot of the things we did because we worked as a team. Yeah. I'm pretty sure I've always been on subsequent councils that all worked together very well. And Hazel was a terrific leader, there's no question. And Bonnie worked hard as well. I think we've always had a pretty good governance, and it's encouraged participation by a lot of people. And then once you get elected, you go on various committees. As you know, Heritage is one of my pet projects. I love being on that committee. Yep. Now as mayor, I'm ex officio, but I will be attending the meetings as often as I can. But trying to preserve some of those things. As the councillor for Malton, I can remember Dave Cook saying to me, what a shame it was we've lost the history of the Avro Arrow. So away we went. We raised $3 million. It's about 40% completed right now in a warehouse in Barrie. And actually, we're going up to visit it in October if you'd like to come with us.
I would love to.
Yes, and we're going to have a little tour. It's becoming a significant construction right now.
Oh, I'd love it. This is fantastic. So what we're talking about, for anybody who's not aware, is Malton is going to get a full-size replica of the Avro Arrow in what is it called? Legion Park? I can't remember what the name of that little.
No, it's Paul Coffey Park right now.
Paul Coffey Park, sorry.
Adjacent to where the Arrow was built. The Arrow was built technically right now on Pearson Airport property, on that corner of Dairy and Airport Road. Yeah. So we have the park just slightly outside the catchment area, but we're building it there. And I have to unfortunately make a small correction. It's not a full-size Arrow anymore. It's about an 80%, 85% Arrow. The reason we did that during COVID, the price of aluminum and everything else went through the roof. Right. So instead of trying A, cancel the project, B, trying to collect another $1 million, we just scaled it back a little. Once it's on a 22-foot pedestal up in the air, it's going to be fantastic. And people are going to say, gee, that looks like only 80% of the size of the Arrow. The span of the wings, I think, is 58 feet. So I don't think we're going to notice if it's 56 or 55.
I think it'll be just amazing. So yeah, want to talk about one of those legacy projects. I mean, this is, you've driven this for many years now. It started before COVID, of course, and just thrilled to see it, come to life. Hopefully you'll be there for the ribbon uncutting, whenever that happens. And
No, it'll be soon. They're projecting mid-2025, and the interesting awesome. Part will be, it's going to come down on flatbeds in chunks. Okay. And they're going to put up some tenting and assemble do the final assembly in Paul Coffey Park, so that I think we should set up some bleachers and people can just come and watch for a bit. And then the final painting and all the decals and everything. And then the day they raise it up on that arm, I'd love to know how they're going to do it. I'm going to ask them when we go on the visit, are we bringing in a Sikorsky helicopter to lift that sucker up on the pedestal, or what are we going to do with it? It's going to be right behind the Malton letters. It's significant because people don't understand that Malton is the second largest aerospace hub in Canada. Right. And we have over 350 feeder industries that make all kinds of things for aerospace and aeronautics. And it's really important to commemorate that. And we have a CF 100 on a pedestal. We'll have the model of the Arrow. And I have since found a Lancaster that nobody knew existed. And it's in Prince Edward County. And it's been renovated and reestablished, and it's on display there for 5 years. And then at that point, a subdivision's going in where it is. So we will be ready to take it into our new home. And that's our triple crown of aerospace that we produced in Malton.
I think I'm getting goosebumps. That is awesome.
Isn't that neato?
So this next question, it's a loaded one, and I apologize. And it's one of the ones I'm sure we can go on for hours and hours. But if you could highlight in your own mind a couple of people, a few people that you feel have had positive contributions to the city. I know we've talked about Hazel and former Councillor Cullum, but just people that had a positive impact on you or in the way that the city has developed in your mind. Just highlight some people.
Well, you know what? That's hard because I've met so many nice people in my life and so many people who have helped me a lot and taught me a lot. I have to actually harken back to Mr. Chrétien. I worked under him for 12 years. He was very generous when we needed something like the bridge on Mavis to raise the train tracks. It was a huge congestion point. And I went to him and talked to him, and eventually we got a grant for part of that bridge. The other thing that he did for us, I don't know, he trying to remember what he did. He was just a very generous prime minister. He was very good with areas that he'd already won, whereas a lot of prime ministers are giving out goodies to places that they need to win seats in. He was very good at making all of our MPs feel valuable and get some of their projects. I'm trying to think of someone else. I don't know. I can't narrow it down. I should have given it more thought. I should have read your questions in advance.
It's better off the cuff.
Well, maybe not.
Well, I'm like, I imagine, I don't know if you had a grand plan of entering politics, let alone the path you've taken, but did someone like Hazel or inspire you to follow that course?
No, it was a negative inspiration, actually. My kids in Hawthorne, we were invited as the parents who didn't have full-time jobs to go look at a sex ed film they were going to show to grade threes. And I had taught sex ed in high school at Burnham Thorpe Collegiate. So I walked up and the movie was terrible. It was an American movie, started with the American flag, and it was just horrible. It was making parents sound stupid. It was telling kids to go talk to the zookeeper to find out what goes on with reproduction. And so I went up and I looked at the can, and it had on the can grade 10 to 12. And I thought, why are they showing this to kids in grade 3? So I said to the principal, look, I'm very pro sex ed, but this film is not suitable. Well, if you don't like it, keep your daughter home tomorrow. I said, well, that's worse because then she's going to get all the stories on the playground, all told every which way by the other little kids. So I called the superintendent of schools. He put a halt on it. But then I started to think, where are these decisions being made? What are the controls? What goes on around here? So I started going to Board of Education meetings and sit in the audience. And after a while, I figured out council meetings or the board meetings were where the decisions were being made. They were being made at committees somewhere. So I started going to the committees. And then they broke up our ward and there was an open seat. So that's how I got into politics. I decided to run for that seat. Strangely enough, my opponent was a guy named Charlie Brown. And if you're running in a political campaign, a name like Charlie Brown's going to attract a lot of votes. So I thought, this is not going to be easy. So I went around and I knocked on every door in the ward. It took me a couple months. And at one point, a kid answered the door just off Old Carriage Road.
Okay.
And he looked at me, and I was soaked. It was raining. And he looked at the picture on the pamphlet and he goes, is this really you? And his mother was standing there and she whacked him in the ear, sent him into the kitchen. And she called me in and gave me a cup of tea. And she said, stop canvassing. I'll do the rest of the street for you. But that's how I got into politics. It was absolutely not an inspiration of any kind that was positive.
Right. Well, it's fascinating to see the path that you follow because, I mean, you're never one to, in my opinion, you're never one to back down from a challenge. You're never one. You've got ideas. You've got, there's a passion behind what you do, and I think that shows through in kind of the course that you've taken. I've worked with you on committees in the past, and I've always admired that about you. There's a relentless push from you. It's not sitting back and watching, and so I do appreciate that myself as a citizen.
Well, it did hurt me at one point. I lost the election in 2010. I refer to it as my 4 year sabbatical. And that was because we took on Hazel on this hotel thing with her son. And it's funny because Hazel and I were really good friends before I got elected as a councillor. She always told me I was the only MP that really cared about the city, which is not true, but it was nice to hear it. Then I came back and I won in Ward 5, and I really do believe there's a plan in the atmosphere for people because Ward 5 needed a lot of work. And I have a lot of energy, as you've probably noticed. And the nice part was once Hazel retired, I got a phone call from her. You can't miss her voice on the phone. She sounds like W.C. Fields in female, if you know who W.C. Fields was. And she said, I'd like to have breakfast with you tomorrow at Bobby's. I said, okay. And I'm driving up there and thinking all the way up there, man, I'm going to get it for that inquiry. I'm going to get it for all that stuff. She never mentioned it once. She just talked about what I was doing in Malton. She was following it closely. She said, Malton has needed somebody like you for a very long time. Not that I'm flattering myself, but it needed a lot of work.
Yep.
And one of the happiest, proudest things I've done in my whole career might seem kind of silly to other people, but we converted an unused swimming pool attached to Lincoln Alexander to a youth hub.
Yeah.
And it has attracted over 70,000 kids.
It's incredible.
Since October. And so we're now building a second one in the Dixie Bloor area at Glen Forest. And the money's coming in so easily this time. The region has put $6 million in their budget, and the city's put $6 million in their budget. And that is probably the second most needy area in the city for kids to have a place to go that's their own. And then they have counseling. We sneak it in. We put it up on the mezzanine. And once they get really familiar with the dance studio and the recording studio and the games room, they wander upstairs if they need some help with health problems or anything else. So it's really designed by kids. The board of directors were 10 kids from each of the high schools, 2 of the high schools. And it's used because they designed it. They know what they wanted, and everybody goes there.
It's exceptional, and what a again a legacy building moment for the city as well. Now, let's end on a real quick one. If you had one wish for the next 50 years, I know, loaded question again. I apologize. It's hard to ask the mayor a question like this, I think, but one wish for the city looking forward to 50 years from now, what would it be?
It would be to become a true metropolis. We are one of the most mixed cities in the world. I don't like using the word tolerant. It means you tolerate something. We welcome immigrants. We welcome people from all over the world. So it's a beautiful city. I would like to see it expanded. I would like to see the arts expanded, particularly as I referenced the LAC. By the way, that was the other thing I forgot about. Mr. Chrétien, when he was first elected in 93, did an infrastructure program. He was the first one to do it, but it was supposed to be for bridges and sidewalks. Between a 5 to 7 a.m. phone call for about 4 months from Hazel to my Wake Me Up in Ottawa, to a 5 after 7 phone call to Art Eggleton, who was the infrastructure guy, we got 13 million out of the infrastructure funds to build the LAC.
Right.
So my dream is to make the LAC a full theater. We were already started looking at the plans with the architects. We can get up to 2,000 seats in there without moving the walls and the ceiling. And then I would like to, as I said, do a conference center there, which will attract people to our city. We've got Square One right across the road, so we're going to hit them up for some contributions to this. It's going to add to tourism. It's going to add to people that use their plaza. I would like to see a real hub in the center of our city.
Right.
I would also like to build at least 2 more youth hubs. We have at least 2 more areas that could use youth hubs. I would just like to see our city care first about the residents, second about all the other things.
Right.
We have a very strong economy. We have the second strongest economy in Ontario. We need to spend that money here in the city. We need to foster more festivals. We need to give all the people that do all that volunteer work a much better grant system so that they're not begging for money for most of the time. They're actually planning the event. And I'd like to build more things like the Agro I'd like us to take pride in our city and pick up some of the things that we have been responsible for, make sure everybody knows it.
Well, you have a fan here of those ideas. I love the thought of it, and I harp on the of Mississauga, by Mississauga, about Mississauga, in Mississauga. Really celebrating the place we live, and what better way? I mean, your roots here, 50 years, yourself here in the city, celebrating our city's 50th anniversary, and looking forward to the positive things to come. Mayor Parrish, thank you so much for spending time with us, and best wishes, best luck in the term ahead and beyond. And again, thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you, Matthew. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for spending some time with us here, and thank you also to Madam Mayor Carolyn Parrish for sharing moments and milestones with us for the City of Mississauga's 50th anniversary. Like, subscribe, and follow us, and we will see you on future episodes with Heritage Mississauga.